Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to head down to Germany once again. We're going to go to the state of Bavaria, Bayern, and we're having a look at a beer from another brewery that I have never tried anything from before. Now if you've watched the channel before you will know that I'm a huge fan of my traditional German style beers. This one is a style that I don't get to review all that many of just because we don't see too many of them. It's quite appropriate for the month of October, and apparently this particular example has won a good number of awards, and I'm guessing that's the reason that it made its way up here to Sweden. So fingers crossed this is another good beer, and I'm very curious to see what it has in store for us. So for this review then we are going to go to a little place called Lofling, which is in the kind of southern part of Bavaria, right in the east almost, very close to the Czech border, and we're going to have a look at my first beer from Brauerei Hofmark. So this one is their Märzen. It comes in at 5.6% ABV, and yeah, this one should hopefully be quite interesting because it has won a number of awards from what I understand. So for those of you that don't know, the Märzen style of beer is a lager beer. So cold fermentation, and it's a slightly more malty lager if you like, obviously not quite as malty as the Dunkel, but yeah, quite biscuity and quite caramelly from my experience. But this is the type of beer that was traditionally served at Oktoberfest, although of course now many of the breweries are brewing a more kind of Helles type fest beer if you like, rather than the more malty and more alcoholic Märzens. So yeah, this is really interesting to come across another German example of this style, because I've reviewed most of the Oktoberfest beers from Munich and from the big breweries in Munich. So to get this one was a nice treat actually. We got this beer here in Sweden as part of the Tillfällig assortment, the temporary assortment in Systembolaget on the 29th of September 2020, if I'm remembering the date correctly. But yeah, very curious to see how this one turns out. This is a brewery that I hadn't heard anything of before. Even when I'd been in Bamberg visiting my friend Daniel, I had not heard of anything that these guys had done. I hadn't seen these beers in Beerotech or anything, but that's one of the great beauties of the beer in Germany. It's very regional and very local, so you can always find new and random things in very different places. But these guys seem to have a good bit of size to them actually, so it's a bit surprising that this beer, that I didn't see this at this brewery before actually. But yeah, hopefully it's a nice beer. Nice to review a Märzen, especially a German brewed Märzen in October as well, so I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this beer. So let's see how we get on then. So as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that hopefully I could do in the future from Brauerei Hofmark. This is the very first time I'm trying one of their beers, as I mentioned. There's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel of course has a geography based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you're interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the German beers that I've reviewed for you. That's being added to whenever I get the opportunity, not as often as I would like at the moment, because you know, we haven't been getting all that many different German beers up here in Sweden unfortunately, but hopefully I can sort that out somehow soon. But yeah, do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Brauerei Hofmark then, on to my brewery notes. So Brauerei Hofmark, as I mentioned to you already, are based in Lofling in the Treiching municipality, which is in an area known as the Scharm in the east of Bavaria. If you think about the way that the Czech border, the Czech-Bavarian border kind of goes, Czech kind of cuts into Bavaria a little bit like this, and you'll find Brauerei Hofmark and Lofling just about here, about halfway along the kind of southern side of the Czech-German border actually. But the brewery itself has a history that traces back to 1590, but there's not a lot actually available on the internet that tells you about the early history of this brewery. I had my German friend kind of try and do a search for me using different words, different German keywords and things like that, but nothing really came up. So other than knowing that this brewery started sometime back in 1590, I can't tell you much about the first kind of 350-ish years of this brewery's history. But in the more modern era, in 1960, the brewery was bought by Paul Herring, and his wife, who reinvigorated the brand. So the brewery itself is located at Hofmarkstrasse 15, basically Hofmark Street number 15 in Lofling, and hence the name Hofmark. So they took a very local name when they took over the brewery. But in 2008, the brewery reopened the Zum Hofmark Boy in the courtyard of Lofling Castle as well, which looks very nice if you look at the photos of it. And today, the brewery is run by Braukart and Claudia Cording, who mark the third generation of this family to run the brewery. And this is very common in Germany, of course. Germany really has a culture of family businesses and small companies, if you like. So many of the breweries that you'll find in these smaller German towns are family companies that pass through the various generations. But today these guys have a good bit of size to them. Actually, they produce around 10,000 hectolitres of their own beer, but they also run a bottle filling service for different breweries around the local area as well. And the current brewmaster is Martin Huber, who has been with the company since 2017, and he's also very young actually. He's only about 25 or 26 or something like that, according to the articles that I read. But the brewery are particularly known for this beer, the Märzen, because they won a number of awards for it. And that, I guess, is the reason that we got this beer up here in Sweden. And as of September 2020, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced about 20 or so different kinds of beers, mainly German traditional styles, of course, but yeah, they maybe, who knows, they maybe will experiment with different things in the very near future. So this is a brewery that we can only really talk about its history in terms of the last 50-60 years, but yeah, beyond that it does seem to have a long history, but I think it was probably known by a different name. I'm sure that in one of the articles it actually said that the name Hofmark was chosen when the new owners took over in the 60s actually. So yeah, so it's a kind of strange thing, that, because it's one of the issues that I often have when researching German breweries is that a number of them are not very active when it comes to their social media, so trying to contact them through Facebook and things like that is a little bit difficult. They're not so responsive to emails and things like that either. I didn't actually try to email Hofmark, but you know, they weren't so active on the social media, from what I gather actually. But yeah, as I say, a brewery that are well known for this particular beer, and it would be quite interesting to try some of their other ones at some point as well. So who knows, maybe the next time I go down to visit Daniel in Bamberg, there might be some of these beers in the Beerotech shop. But yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Brauerei Hofmark for the moment. Definitely nice to try another Bavarian beer for you here on the channel, and yeah, we can leave the history section at that. So if you want to learn more about this brewery, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with the latest goings on. But like I say, not a lot of German breweries are so active when it comes to social media, in my experience. And you can of course check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's have a little look at this one then and see how we get on. So as you can see, this beer, the artwork on this is a little bit more modern compared to some of the other Bavarian beers and stuff that you're going to come across. At least I think it's a bit more modern, but it's a kind of modern, old school type thing. It's got the nice little top label there that you often get on these different German beers, and it's got quite a nice bottle cap as well. What does it say here? Hofmark Bier Braukunst aus dem Bayerischen Wald. So yeah, beer from the Bavarian forest. So yeah, you can see nice bright yellow bottle cap on this one with the hop flowers there. But yeah, you can see also it shows you Anno 1590, if I'm saying that right, 1590. But yeah, the Märzen beer. It says on the back here, handmade beer from the Bavarian forest. We've been brewing as a traditional craft brewery since 1590 using regional organically certified ingredients of the highest quality, brewed with passion for beer lovers who value taste, the best taste. So yeah, this one is actually an organic beer as well. There you can see the EU's organic symbol down there. So yeah, nicely presented beer, this one, and this is the award that it won actually. It's got the Bio Kreis in German is cross, of course, so it's got an organic award, which you can see there, and it's also got one of the European stars, and that's the main reason. I'm guessing this is the main award that these guys have won, the European Beer Star, and that's probably the main reason why this beer was picked up by Systembolaget. So yeah, quite cool that they keep an eye on the. I didn't realise that was one of the methods they used, but quite cool that they keep an eye out for what breweries are winning awards and things like that, and then bring those to Sweden. So yeah, pretty cool. But yeah, 5.6% Märzen beer. This one, a half litre. So let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting. This beer actually was quite cheap as well. In fairness, I think I paid about 30 Swedish kroners for it, so that's about €3 for the bottle. Of course, it's nowhere near as cheap as you'll get them in Germany. You'll get these bottles for like €1, something like that. But yeah, you know, for us up here in Sweden, I think 30 kroners for a nice proper German beer is a pretty good deal, I would say. But yeah, hopefully this turns out to be a nice beer. Like I said to you, a 5.6% Märzen beer, and we'll just stick it into the glass there. So yeah, I like how that goes together. This one definitely looks very, very nice. So yeah, as you can see and as you would expect from the Märzen beer, this one's poured a lovely kind of, I would describe the colour of this as quite coppery, to be honest with you. It's got a lovely kind of copper kind of colour to it. This one, you can see the head on this is over, I'd say it's just over a finger, maybe a finger and a quarter, and I'd say it's a kind of creamy coloured head actually. But yeah, very, very clear beer this one. One or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass and a few little ones going up towards the bottom of that head there. But overall it does look very, very nice. You can see my lovely Pilsner Urquell tankard that I have for this one. I don't actually have. I did actually buy, when I was in Bamberg last time, I bought a tankard from Brauerei Spezial, but I actually left it at Daniel's apartment, so he still has it. But yeah, this is my lovely Pilsner Urquell tankard that I have. But yeah, lovely kind of coppery colour beer, this one. It certainly looks very nice. As I've told you before, when it comes to lager beers, for those of you that don't know, the thing that really defines a lager beer is that it's a cold fermentation. I think they term it bottom fermenting, if you like. But in Germany, of course, you have the Helles, which is the kind of blonde lager. You have the Märzen, which is a kind of special lager, more of an amber lager. Then you've got the Dunkel, which is the more kind of mahogany coloured one. Then you have the Schwarzbiers, and of course you do have the Doppelbock as well. But yeah, in the Czech Republic, they've got their kind of equivalents. You have the Svetli, which is the equivalent of the Helles, the Letzak, which is a kind of somewhere between, you know, like a Vienna lager and a Märzen, if you like. But it's an amber lager essentially. You've got the Cherny, which is the equivalent of the Dunkel, and then you have the Tmavi, which is the equivalent of a Schwarzbier. So the Czechs drink a lot of lager beers as well. But the origin of the Märzen beer is that Germany obviously had very, very strict laws. Everybody knows about the Reinheitsgebot, the German purity law, the 4 ingredients, and so on. But when it comes to Märzen beer, because back in the day there wasn't artificial refrigeration, what they had to do was brew the beer in March, hence the name Märzen. März is German for March. So what they would do is they would brew a slightly stronger beer with more hops and a bit more malt and stuff like that. It would sit in the kellers, which is the cellars that they used to dig into the mountains. It would sit in there and ferment away, and then they would release it in October when they were allowed to brew beer again. So they would brew more beer in the months that they were allowed to brew beer. To kind of deal with that, because they didn't have artificial refrigeration. This is why they used to brew all these other kind of beers actually. So yeah, this one, they basically, because they didn't have the artificial refrigeration, they used to dig the kellers under the mountains so that they had basically a cold temperature for these beers to ferment, and they would ferment away over the summer between April and September when brewing beer was actually banned. So yeah, that's the story of the Märzen beer. But yeah, as you can see, this one in terms of its appearance is a nice example. So let's have a closer look at the aroma and see how we get on. So yeah, this one for me smells very, very nice actually. So straight away with this beer, you get a very nice, how do you say, you do get a nice little bit of breadiness with this one. You get that traditional German smooth breadiness. It's one of the things that I really miss about living in Heidelberg, was that we had access to the German bakeries. I love the German bread. So yeah, this beer has a really nice, it has a very, very nice kind of smooth bready backbone to it. It smells like a kind of white bready quality, to be honest, but it does have a little bit of a more bread crusty type note in there as well. You've got some nice sweet caramel, I would say. yeah, definitely a nice little bit of a sweeter kind of caramelly note to this one. Straight up caramel as well, not like kind of, you know, butter, you know, butter candies or whatever. Definitely a straight sweet caramel. There's a nice kind of biscuity quality to this one, like McVitie's digestive biscuits, which is quite a common thing to get in Märzen's, in fairness, and that kind of more brown sugary element to the beer sits on top of the nice breadiness. So yeah, to put it in layers, nice kind of white bready base, a little bit of a bread crusty quality in there as well, some sweet caramel, a little bit of a kind of biscuity quality in there as well, and I think that sums up the malt base quite nicely actually. One thing that's quite interesting about this is that for me the malt base smells very smooth, because when there was the Klosterhofbrauerei in Heidelberg that used to brew with organic malts, and quite often I found they could smell and taste a little bit chalky, but this one smells very very smooth and very nice actually. So maybe they've kind of sorted out the organic malts a little bit more over the last few years. It was 2014 that I lived in Germany, so that's about 6 years. A lot can happen in an industry in 6 years, but yeah, the aroma, the malty side of this beer is very, very nice. On the hoppy side of things, you have what you'd expect. You've got a little bit of that quite nice and smooth earthiness which you expect of the German noble hops. There's a nice little bit of kind of floral aromaticity to the beer. I'm guessing that it's probably Hallertau hops that are in this, because those are the ones that are traditionally produced in Bavaria, and you get lots of different varieties of Hallertau, so maybe it's a Mittelfrüh hop, a mid-spring hop or something like that. But yeah, you've also got a very nice little bit of lighter grassiness there. But if you're a fan of the German traditional beers as I am, then you will recognise a lot of the hoppy aromas you get out of this. It's got a very typical noble hoppy quality when it comes to the green side of the hops. On the fruity side of things, for me, this beer, again, it has what you'd expect. It's got a nice little bit of a kind of perry ester to it. There is a little bit of that kind of perry thing, maybe a little touch of an appley note, but you're also getting a wee touch of just a very slight, almost candied red fruit out of this one. I always find with the Märzens, especially, and you know, it's because they do have a little bit of that kind of dunkelish character to them almost. Whenever you get a slightly more malty kind of lager beer like this, you do get a little touch of a kind of red fruity note out of it. So you might get just a very slight hint of like a fig or a kind of candied strawberry or something to this beer. But for me, the fruity side of it, it's got a bit of that typical kind of grassy, citrusy type thing going on. There's a little bit of a kind of appley, maybe more perry type ester in there as well, but you do have just a wee tiny touch of a red fruity note to the beer as well. So yeah, take a little bit of time and just enjoy the aroma of this before you get stuck into it, but definitely a very nice bready and kind of caramelly smelling Märzen for me. Really nice example of the style in terms of its aroma. So yeah, let's have a taste of this one then and see how we get on. So this one is the Märzen, coming in at 5.6% ABV from Brauerei Hofmark in Lofling, almost right on the German-Czech border actually. Definitely nice to be able to review this beer for you in just before October actually. This is a very good one to publish in the month of October. So let's get stuck into this one. Slange, Skål, Prost. Yeah, that is very nice actually. Yeah, I mean, one of the things I've always said, I've always felt that the lager beers are underrated. I mean, a lot of the focus in many countries these days is, you know, brewing IPAs and these big sweet pastry stouts and things like that. You know, the focus for a long time, the German beers were kind of pushed aside in favour of the more kind of traditionally English styles of beer by the American breweries, and it's only more recently, in fairness, that the Goses, you're starting to get all these big fruity Goses and Berliner Weisses and stuff like that, although they're not really reminiscent of what the traditional German ones are at all, to be honest. But I have noticed that lager beers are getting a bit more attention, at least here in Sweden these days, and that's really nice. But I love going back to the traditional German styles like this. I mean, in Bavaria you've got so many different traditional beer styles. You know, you've got you've got a lot of breweries that produce some really nice Weizens in there, and you know, in Franconia, the north of Bavaria, you've got about 300 odd breweries in there, which is just kind of crazy. So you know, I'm a huge fan of the Helles. I love Dunkels. I love Doppelbocks. I need to explore the Schwarzbier a little bit more. I feel that's a style I haven't really covered. And the Märzen, in fairness, is one that we don't see too many of up here. But you've got, you know, the Kellers, the Zwickels, the land beers as well. You've got lots of different styles of traditional beer in Germany. You've got Kulschis, Altbiers, the Dortmunders. There's lots of different beers in Germany that I haven't explored too much on the channel. That's something that we really need to fix. So to get another Märzen on the channel, I think is really nice. And this is a style of beer I think that is again a little bit underappreciated. But I will say straight away, this one is a very nice example of the style. I can see why this would win awards within German beer categories. It is really quite nice. It's very smooth and easy to drink actually, because quite often I think some of the Märzens I've had before I've found them quite boozy, but this one really has the nice. It sort of finds it finds a very nice balance. I think this to me comes across as a very nicely balanced beer. So let's try and break down the flavour of this one and describe it for you a little bit. So straight away with this beer, across the middle of the palate you get that nice kind of bready quality. That just blankets the middle of your tongue. For me, when you progress further into the aftertaste, you can feel a few more of the kind of almost toasty, bread crusty elements coming out of this one. So you will notice that the beer, it does dry out in the middle of the palate a little bit, but you've got a sort of brown bready, bread crusty layer that just sits on top of those kind of more toasty notes in the beer. But yeah, I would say that for the middle third of your tongue, and then when you go towards the back third of your tongue, you've got the same things in there, but the sort of brown bready layer feels just a little bit thicker, and you do have a few kind of drier, grainier elements on the very back end of your tongue there, which is quite nice. So yeah, I think it's quite nice. This one has a really good balance to it. You get that slightly more kind of grainy note on that back third of your tongue, but then the sweeter elements come out in the middle third of your tongue, which is quite nice. So yeah, back third of your tongue, more bready, a little bit almost drier and more grainy, and that's quite nice. And then in the kind of middle. The middle kind of third of your palate, it's slightly sweeter and things. This is where you get the kind of typical elements that you expect of the German Märzen, if you like. So yeah, you've got a really nice little bit of a kind of woody. There are a few kind of woody undertones to this one. If you go to the front corners of your palate and then just move diagonally backwards, you will notice there are one or two little woody elements to this beer, which is quite a nice undertone actually. It gives the beer a little bit of smoothness. But yeah, if you go to the very centre of your palate, you'll get a little bit of the kind of sweet, slightly boozy-ish caramel to this one. But as you move from the very centre of your tongue further out, actually, that's when you get the really nice. That's when you get a really nice kind of smoothness to this beer. So yeah, bottom layer, toasty bread crust. On top of that you get the smoother kind of brown bread. Then you get the more oily layer of a sweeter caramel, kind of more biscuity note, and a few kind of grainy elements in there as well. So I like how this one goes together in that sense. So yeah, the sort of caramelly layers that this one has is quite nice actually, but the more you drink of it, I think the brown sugar almost feels a little bit darker. But yeah, the one thing I will say about this is the malt base in this beer, which is the difficult thing to get right when it comes to these lager beers. It comes across as very smooth. One of the gripes I always had with the organic beers was that the grains came across as a little bit kind of almost chalky, to be honest with you. But they've got this one. This one comes across as really nice and very, very smooth. So I can see why Martin Huber, the brewmaster of this one, you can definitely be quite proud of this beer, and it's quite unusual to have such a young brewmaster at a more traditional type brewery like this in Germany. So that's even more impressive actually, that he's pulled off something like this. I think this is a really nice example of the Märzen style beer, and the malt base is pretty spot on this one. On the hoppy side of things then, in the back corners of the palate you've got a nice little touch of the earthiness in there, which is typical of what you expect of German noble hops, and as you push further forward along the sides of the palate it gets a wee touch herbal, but then it's a little bit more kind of floral and aromatic as you reach the kind of front corners of the palate there, and as you go round the very front curve of the tongue, it's just a little bit lighter and more grassy actually. So I like how that goes together with this beer. So yeah, typical German noble hoppy elements coming out of this one. I wonder if it could be a bit of Hercules that's in this, because it does strike me that the floral characters that come out of this beer strike me as just being a little touch stronger actually, which I quite like. But on the fruity side of things then, as I always say, on the front third of your tongue you get that nice oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters just kind of roll their way out of the beer. So for me, this one, again, it's got a nice balance to it. So yeah, if you go towards the back of that front third of your tongue, you get a wee bit of a kind of citrusy note to it, but as you move further forward, it kind of evolves to be a sort of more kind of peary type ester. There's a wee touch of an appley quality to this one as well, and it's definitely a little bit more oily in that sense as you reach the kind of very front tip of your tongue actually. It's got a very nice kind of oily fruity character on the very front tip of the tongue, but on the very front edge you've got a nice kind of you do have a nice kind of grassy sort of citrusy zestiness to it. It's got a little bit of that lemony grassy zestiness there. There are one or two wee elements of a slightly, almost, is it right to say, a kind of slightly figgy quality to the beer, but they come out a little bit further in the aftertaste. But I definitely describe the fruity side of this beer as being more along the lines of kind of peary, appley, and then that sort of grassy citrusy note. But yeah, this is a very, very nice example of the Märzen style beer. I've not had too many of these. It's a style that I will hold my hands up and say I don't know all that well, but from what I understand it should be, and from previous experiences I do think this one is a very nice example. So if you are watching from Bavaria, do let me know some other Märzens that I should check out from the from down there. That would be really cool to review some more of these on the channel, because probably I can pick some up through Bierotech or something in Bamberg the next time I go down there. But yeah, I really like how this one goes together, so it gets a big thumbs up from me. Mouthfeel wise then, what would we say about this? Yeah, again, it's got that typical kind of German smoothness and cleanliness to it, so you've got a really nice, you have a very nice kind of oiliness to this beer, and you do expect that for the Märzens and the Dunkos a bit, in fairness. You do expect them to have a little bit of oily character because of the malty notes in the beer. But yeah, I would describe this beer as being at the top end of light-bodied, bottom end of mid-bodied. The carbonation does have a bit of crispness to it, which is kind of what you expect from German beer. The Czech beers, the Czech late sacks are a good bit kind of smoother, I think, than the German Märzens. The German ones are just that little bit more crisp, if you like. I always find the German beers a bit more crisp and oily. The Czech beers are a bit more kind of smooth and kind of bready, if that makes sense. But yeah, this one for me has a nice little bit of an oily character to it. It's got a good little bit of crispness, and it comes across as very clean actually, which is very nice. In terms of hoppy bitterness, I think this one is probably about 20-25 IBUs, somewhere in that region. You get a bit of the bitterness from the grains in the middle of the palate. You do get a little bit of that as you progress further into the aftertaste. You do get a bit of the kind of toasty or bread crusty notes coming out of the beer, but you also get a good little bit of bitterness from the hops as well. And I do wonder if it's Hercules that's in this one, because there are just a few elements coming out of this that are a bit reminiscent of Hercules. Almost the slightly darker floral notes that the beer has. It wouldn't surprise me. But yeah, there's a nice little bit of juicy fruitiness to this one, kind of a peary appley ester, like I said, a bit of a wee slight citrusy zest on the front tip of the tongue, but yeah, nice oily fruits, nice kind of sweet but also quite smooth malt base in this one. And yeah, I think it is just fair to say that this is a very nice example of the Märzen style beer, and compared to my previous experiences with organic beers, this one I think is pretty impressive. So thumbs up to Martin Huber and to Brauerei Hofmark for this. This is definitely a nice example of the Märzen style beer. I wish we saw a few more of these. I'd love to learn a little bit more about this style and try a few different things, because when you go from brewery to brewery in Germany, you always get little niche things between them. So I would love to learn a little bit more about this style But yeah, I've really enjoyed reviewing this one for you. I just wish as well that they had a bit more information about the brewery on their website. The website from these guys, the history section of it wasn't so comprehensive. I'd like to know a bit more about the early history of this brewery. So who knows, maybe if I do another review from Hofmark in the future, if we do get another one of their beers up here in Sweden, maybe I can talk a little bit more about that in the next video. But yeah, a very nice example of the Märzen style beer. So let's round off the review there. So yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Brauerei Hofmark as well. Do give me some other examples of the Märzen beer that I should, or the Märzen style beer that I should look out for. I'd love to know a few more of those, and hopefully I can review more of those for you at some point in the future. Hopefully we can revisit Brauerei Hofmark at some time soon, but we'll probably need to wait until I go back to Germany for that, because beer is so regional. I don't know if we will see any more beers from Hofmark in the near future, if you like. I think we got this one because it was an award-winning beer, and it is the original Oktoberfest style beer, of course, too. But yeah, thank you again for watching my reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Brauerei Hofmark as well. Do let me know some other Märzens that I could look out for, and yeah, hopefully we can review a few more traditional German beers for you at some point soon. But thank you again for watching. This one was the Märzen from Brauerei Hofmark in Lofling in eastern Bavaria down in Germany. Slange, Skål, Prost, and thank you for watching. Make sure you check out this beer if you get the chance. Cheers.